So, a lot of people, when they're getting ready to read the Bible or it's recommended to them as an activity, they'll complain about finding it a bit boring and a bit dry, or they'll, speak of it as this really daunting chore. And I think that there are a number of ways that these sorts of feelings can be overcome. And I think a lot of this feeling also comes out of seeing the Bible in the wrong way. Because personally, I've come to find reading the Bible and also praying very therapeutic as activities, even though a lot of people find doing either to be a bit of a chore a lot of the time. And as I go on reading the Bible, I find it does help me, but uh, the more important thing, I think, is for people to find a version of the Bible that they actually feel comfortable with. And when I say that, what I mean is that you can go to a website called BibleGateway.com, and what it has is many different versions of the Bible, different translations. And what I found was that initially I simply went ahead and just picked a version that I felt comfortable reading. And this made it a lot easier for me to read it just as a natural activity. And, once I got accustomed to doing that on a regular basis, it was a lot easier for me to move on to the versions of the Bible that people typically recommend for studying, such as the New International Version or the English Standard Version. People who recommend the activity of Bible reading tend to stress these two versions. You'll run into some people who are King James onlyists, King James Version onlyists, sorry. And by that, what I mean is that they consider the King James Version of the Bible to be the only version of the Bible anyone should ever read, and they consider all other versions of the Bible to be demonic or evil or, to have something the matter with them. And so again, I think the King James Version creates its own problems in that it is very difficult for the average person to simply sit and read it. The language used in the King James Version was even deliberately antiquated by its own times and standards, and many of the words in that version have changed their meaning in the few hundreds of years or so that the King James Version has been read. So I think it's very important to to locate a translation of the Bible that you can actually understand and to understand without somebody teaching you. Because many of the cults which have come to be offshoots of Christianity over time actually often started out as King James only denominations or denominations which did not allow people to read any translation of the Bible they wanted, but instead insisted upon their own translation. And the problem was that the leadership was able to persuade followers of their movements that the Bible was saying things that it wasn't really saying, because of course the people couldn't simply sit and read it for themselves. So I think, again, the importance of finding a version of the Bible you are comfortable with is that it gives you the ability to actually evaluate the claims people are making about what the Bible says. And certainly one could argue that the fact of reading different versions means that there is sometimes something lost in translation. But again, we have the internet now. We have the ability to look these things up and to examine these, what might seem like a contradictory thing or something that may not quite make sense to us. There are ways of learning about this now that didn't really exist in the past. So I think we should try to perhaps perceive reading the Bible as necessary to freedom and to democracy and to because there are always going to be people who will want to read the Bible. There will always be people who want to believe in the Christian God. But by taking the time to actually learn what the Bible really says, you can protect yourself from people who may attempt to mislead you about its content. But as I mentioned earlier, I actually do find reading the Bible to be very therapeutic, and I think it is important for people to try to see the Bible as something that can be comfortable to read and comforting. And, because if you think of it as a daunting and unpleasant chore, then of course you will naturally not want to do it. You'll naturally resist doing it because, why should you want to if it is just unpleasant? So again, that is again partly why I say it's so important to find a version of the Bible that you are comfortable with. Again, and I would say this about prayer as well, really. Uh, but yeah, there is, I think, a tendency for a lot of people to encourage one another to regard reading the Bible as a chore. And I think it is because even though so many of us have come to quite rightly understand that we are saved by the grace that God has offered us rather than our own actions, there are still a lot of people who subconsciously feel that they must somehow earn their salvation. And a lot of people still, I think, wrongly believe that you can somehow earn your salvation by reading the Bible or by praying. And so, therefore, they encourage themselves and others to see it as some sort of labor, when in fact, they're actually activities that benefit you. They help you. They don't help God, really. It to God, how does it help him? He already has everything he needs. He doesn't need anything from you. So, it is better to understand reading the Bible as something that benefits you. Uh, I had other thoughts in my mind, but I can't seem to remember them right now, so I may do a second part of this video. But yes, oh, actually no, I do remember now. A lot of people, when they consider reading the Bible for the first time, they make the mistake of thinking about the entire Bible all at once. And this is not how you should perceive the Bible. Again, the Bible is a massive, massive text, and in fact, it isn't really just a text. It is a Bible. It is a library of different books. So of course, just as it would be irrational to say to somebody, "Oh, you should go to the library and read," it would be unfair to expect that person to go into the library and literally read every single book there in succession in one sitting. That would be, an inhuman task. And just the same, I think it's important for people when they're just starting out to have a willingness to break the Bible down into smaller portions that they themselves can handle. If you are finding the task of reading the Bible daunting, what you can say to yourself is, okay, each day I will just read one verse. If I feel like going further than that, I will, but I will limit it to one verse. Now, a lot of people will hear me say that and say, oh, there's a danger of misunderstanding what the Bible is saying because you're viewing each verse outside of its context instead of reading it in context. And, to those people, I'd say, well, somebody just starting out reading the Bible probably would be ill advised to immediately apply everything that they're reading without, properly examining it in the first place. And, so I would say it's important to talk to people about what you're reading and to look into study resources online and to compare different versions if you find that helpful. But, you know, I feel like the task of just, well, I'm calling it a task. The action of starting to read the Bible is I think, the attempt is more important than the end goal. And, you know, to there is also no need for you to start at Genesis as well. Many people find it more helpful to start somewhere, like the Book of John. Many people will recommend starting with the Book of John, the Gospel of John, because the Gospel of John, in its first chapter, contains a kind of condensed version of what most people would hopefully know so that they can understand the context of everything that happens later. So it's sort of like a little condensed version of the Old Testament packed into one chapter, with the most significant, well, relevant events. And so it's probably, a lot of people recommend it. Or the Book of Mark, because in Mark, they don't dawdle or dwindle with anything. They sort of just, it's Jesus did this, then Jesus did that. It's very action packed. Some people say it's like an action movie almost, and I agree. It's surprisingly quick in how it works from each event. to the next event. You don't get any breathing room really. And so I think a person sitting down to read the book of Mark would actually be pleasantly surprised at uh, how different it seems from how people typically talk about the Bible. Because again, a lot of the people who talk about the Bible, because it has this reputation as being arcane and fusty, a lot of unfortunately, and I don't mean this callously as I say it, but a lot of the people who talk about the Bible, who are well read in it, unfortunately end up being people who are likewise a bit dusty and a bit fusty, and will necessarily end up talking about it in very dry and uh, passionless terms. When in truth, if you go and read the Bible for itself, it isn't a dry and passionless text. Just read Job, just read the book of Psalms, just read Song of Solomon. There's many very passionate, very intense images and expressions of emotion in the Bible. So to think of it as a dull text would be to completely mischaracterize it. And I'm noticing that as I speak, I'm speaking in a very in complex terms, and that probably is reinforcing the view that the Bible has to be an over like such a challenging text that a normal person couldn't just sit down and read it. But I think that is the advantage of going to a website like BibleGateway.com and intentionally seeking out versions that you feel more at home with. And I very much would recommend not just remaining with them, but once you feel comfortable, to try other versions as well, so that you can get a clearer understanding of the text over time. Because when you are reading the Bible for the first time, it's inevitable that you will be viewing it through your own cultural lens. For example, when I was first reading the Bible, I had been raised in a very puritanical environment. So as I read the Bible, I read it with a very extreme bias, in that I tended to notice all of the verses that were commands or even demands, but I didn't really notice all of the verses on grace. I didn't actually start noticing those verses on grace until much later in life, maybe 10 plus years after the first time I read the Bible. And I had encountered people who took the verses on grace much more seriously than they took the more disciplinarian verses. And so that greatly changed my understanding of the text in ways that were not only very beneficial to me, but also increased my appreciation of it and my legitimate understanding of the text. So again, it's very important not to like if you had asked me back when I was first reading the Bible whether or not I was reading it unjaundiced and unbiased, I would have said yes. I would have said that I was working very hard to remove my own bias. But it was only through speaking to a lot of different sorts of Christians that I later realized how biased I actually am in of myself. And so, yes, I think it is very important to try to talk to people who actually will challenge your assumptions about the text. And that isn't to say that you're obligated to instantly agree with these people. I think that, it is important to take what people say with a grain of salt as well. But just think, it's okay to experiment a little with different ideas and see what works for you. And also, yeah, just you're not obligated to give into cultural pressure. It does matter for you to look for ways, particularly if you are actually reading the Bible as a Christian or a prospective Christian, to look for ways of reading the Bible and engaging with God in ways that are organic to you and your own current, state of mind and your current needs. Um, Not to say that you should be too self-focused, but it does matter to be authentic, I think. I think that's all I have to say on that matter. That is all of my thoughts and all of the things that I've experienced in my own life when it comes to this matter. And I hope you found it helpful.